fabric is all cut out. We're going to continue on sewing Vash's jacket. By the way, I'm Hawk. I make props and costumes. We're working on Vash The Stampede from Trigun. Last time we cut everything out. This time we're going to put everything together. Going to start simple and start easy. We're going to start with all these little tabs that seem to be all over the jacket. There's 7 of them all together, and we're going to start with those. The tabs and the belts. So I've moved my table forward a bit. This big thing's on wheels, and I designed it solely for sewing. I wanted it higher than I normally do. I'd sew for a while, my back would start hurting. It just made me want to sew a lot less. I found sewing while standing completely takes care of the problem. I can't hunch over while I stand. It's just unnatural. So putting the foot pedal on the ground, leaving everything up here, causes my posture to just kind of straighten itself. I highly recommend sewing while standing. I have all these little flaps to make. They're not really flaps, they're not really straps, but you know, they're purely decoration. Not purely, I guess. They're mostly decoration. So what I'm going to do, it's got a 1/2 inch seam. Let me come to you. I've got a 1/2 inch seam allowance, right? So I'm going to sew all the way around in kind of a U shape, I guess a C shape. I'm going to leave about 1 inch open here, and then flip everything right side out. I'm going to do that for the belts and for the pockets. This is my embroidery machine. I try not to use it for sewing, but my normal machine is inside. So either I have to get a new normal machine or get used to using my embroidery. We've gotten all the way around. Before I get any farther, I cut the corners. That's just so when we flip it right side out, all the fabric doesn't try to bunch. This would be much easier if I'd left a little more room. Now I feel like I'm all crowding you. One down. So now I'm going to top stitch all the way around this to seal all the seams and make sure it's a nice snug fit. All the corners are sharp and crisp. I'm doing about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And that closes up that little hole we just spun everything through. So belts are done. I was going to do this front bit because it's an individual panel that's just, you know, like a belt. I realized I didn't cut it out yet. So I guess I got 2 more pieces to cut out. But we're going to move on to the cowl first. This has got 3 pieces to it, right? It's got a back and then 2 fronts. And I have to remember which, well, I guess it only fits one way, doesn't it? There we go. That makes things a bit easier. Luckily, none of these sides are the same size, right? This is a different size as this, is this. But this part goes towards the center. This is where the arc is, and this is the shoulder seam. So I'm going to sew both of these shoulder seams together, and we'll get all 4 because there's an inside and outside. And we'll pick that back up in a second. This is now my bottom, or the outside. Not for any reason other than I just decided it is now the outside. Let's talk about seams for a second. We have a seam here, right? We can do 3 things with this seam. We can fold them completely out, like this, right? Which makes this seam even and flat. But that means the only thing that's holding this panel to this panel is the thread we just put in. That always bothers me. We can fold it this way. So the excess is going towards the back. But then if you looked at it, it would look like this. So it looks like the front is diving into the back. I want it this way. So when you look at it head on, the seam is in the back. It looks like the back is going into the front. So we'll put a pin in, holding the seam allowance in place. So I don't have to think about it anymore. Because the more I think about things, the worse it tends to be. Now if I were to do the exact same thing to the inside, this would have 6 layers in it. That's huge. So this time, since it doesn't really matter how the inside looks, we're going to fold these the other way. So they go towards the back. Now I flip everything over. This is going to be one of the few times where I do some pins. I'm not going to do a lot of pinning, but I'm going to pin some. So I want the right side facing up, and then the right side facing down. So it is right side to right side. So now I'm going to sew the entire perimeter except for the neckline, because that's where we're going to turn it right side out, and the neck is going to go into the collar. So it's all one solid piece. So let me pin that up, get to sewing, and we'll pick this back up in a second. So this point here, it's kind of extreme. It's a super taper. And it's going to be real hard to figure out where I'm supposed to turn to keep sewing, so I'm not. Yes, I sew right over my pins. So now that I know I'm getting close to the end, I'm going to go completely off of it. And then I'm going to start back up in the other direction. I have my point that's sewn that you cannot see. All right. So I have my stitch line that goes all the way over, and then this line that goes all the way over. But right where I need it, I've got stitches. Entire perimeter has been sewn. I still have pins along the neckline. So we're going to deal with that in a minute. If I were to try and turn this right side out and stitch it, since the fabric curves this way, I would have nothing but problems. So what I'm going to do, clip all my corners, and then put in a bunch of relief cuts. The more of these you put in, the smoother this arc is going to be. Seeing as it's fabric, I'm not terribly worried about it. I'm just cutting real close to the stitch line. I'm not crossing the line. I'm just coming up to it. If you cut through a stitch, you're going to have a bad time. And then we have these points here. I have a line that goes this way and a line that goes this way. I want this piece to be at a 90-degree angle to the opposite line. Right? That way when I turn them right side out, it's less likely to pinch there. I may even do more just because this is a sharp angle. And again, since this has got a curve, I'm putting in a bunch of relief cuts. You could just trim a lot of this excess off. I want to keep it just because I like, when I put my top stitch in, I like there to be extra fabric there. It gives the whole jacket a little more weight. Makes it feel heavier than it is, or it makes it feel more durable than it is, but not be overtly heavy. Because in the end, this is a jacket for stupid cosplay. Right? Nobody's actually on Planet Gunsmoke. We don't have knives coming after you. You're not riding Thomases. I'm going to turn everything right side out. Then I'll do my real thin top stitch, just like I did with all of the strapping. And we should be done with all the canvas to canvas pieces. A broken needle. A little too much fabric in the very corner here, and I pushed it a little too hard. It's just a needle. It's not the end of the world. They're pretty cheap. I'm shocked I only went through one so far. So it's all the canvas on canvas pieces. Now we start sewing the actual jacket together. We're starting by putting the collar on this. In a minute. This sewing machine, it's an embroidery machine. It's super advanced, and I hate sewing on it. So we're gonna get the other machine first. Then we're gonna start pinning some stuff up. Stopped sewing for a couple days because I was mad at my sewing machine, and I wanted it to understand that I was mad at it. It's a machine. It doesn't care. It doesn't even know that I'm mad at it. It just does what it does. So I got my other one out. Hopefully this one will work a little better. So I'm going to do a zigzag stitch all along the edge just to lock everything in place. So what that does, it is well within my seam allowance. So this stitch isn't seen at all, right? But it makes this one solid piece. All my seams are together. I don't have to worry about anything slipping and sliding. It's just one solid piece. So the cowl is basically done until it gets attached to the jacket. And now we're on to the fun part. We need to sew the shoulder seams on both the lining and the shell. Since there is a center seam in the back, I have to be cognizant of the fact that there's a center seam in the back, because I could easily accidentally sew two left sides instead of a left and a right. So I just need to be aware of that. I want two left sides on both the lining and both the lining and the shell. I'm having a hard time with the word shell today. So I'm just going to stitch all that together, and then we're going to talk about the seams in the back and the sides. So the back has a split about exactly 20 inches down for the nape of the neck. So a few times I'll use pins for non-pinning purposes, I guess. I'm using it as a mark. So I put 2 double pins so I know where to stitch to, because stopping at the same point on both the lining and the shell is relatively important. So again, right sides to right sides. This is my back seam, and this is 20.5 inches down. So once I lose the ½ inch at top, it's a 20-inch seam. Math. The other sewing machine was nice and all. It's a good sewing machine. It's for embroidery. I really enjoy using my my workhorse. With Joanne closing, I may have to see if I can get another one, just so I can have one out here too. Seems a little decadent to buy an extra sewing machine, but those are the times we're in. Entertainingly, the shell is mostly done, except for the sleeves. We are now on to the collar. The collar, you look here. So the collar is off-centered. Evenly off-centered, but still off-centered. Which makes my life relatively complicated. And we are 3.5 inches from one side, which of course complicates things dramatically. So here it is. Right side facing up, nice and laid out. And this is the shell. So we need to put the duster on now, right? I've got a couple pins in place to make sure all of my seams are going in the direction I want them to. And then I'm just going to line up the shoulder seams first. Because they should match up pretty well. This I'm probably going to pin a lot of. pin a lot of. I'm probably going to pin thoroughly. Speaking of pinning, I pin perpendicular to how I stitch. Needles, they're round. They're round, and the sewing goes this way. If I had it in line with my stitch, you have more of a chance of hitting the needle. This way, it's a round thing on a round thing, way less likely. And if I want to sew the other way first, and I have to flip it over, my needle heads are exposed so I can pull them out. So to answer your question, yes, Becky, I sew right over my needles. I'm just going to pin everything around and then pick it back up when we're at the collar. Pinned. It doesn't line up perfect. This isn't a commercial sewing pattern. This is my wife's first pattern. So the seams don't line up perfectly. That's fine. That's why we set everything up first. I know what it's going to look like because we've made it a couple of times. I have to be cognizant of which side this flap is on. Like I said, it's a 3.5 inch flap, which means it needs to be 4 inches over. And I gotta rotate things in my head, and I can't quite do that. There we go. Which means this side gets the extra flap. And I'm going 4 inches from the edge of the duster, not from the seam allowance. And then I'm just going to pin everything together and show you what that looks like. Okay, that is a crazy amount of pins. Sometimes that's what it takes. 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then we do the same thing to the lining. Except the lining doesn't have a cowl, so it's a little bit easier. I have a lot of layers here. I'm not 100% everything sewed nice and neat. So I'm going to flip it out, inspect my seam. I am very happy with how that looks. Everything will fit perfect onto the lining. Although, before I get too far, right? This is a finished edge. This cowl part, it doesn't connect to anything else. So, come here. To make sure I don't accidentally sew it to the front, because we're almost at that point. So this is the collar, and this is the front. Jeez Louise. This is the collar, and this is the front piece, right? It's the front piece of the cowl. This doesn't actually get sewn into anything, so I'm just going to fold it back so it's completely out of the way of this seam here, which does get seamed or sewn to a thing. And I'm just going to pin this all the way back like it's a lapel. And make sure to pin it just through the itself and the base layer. And I'm going to do that on the other side too. That way, when I am ready to sew this seam here, I don't have to worry about this getting caught in between the two seams. Lining, right side up. Shell, right side down. We get to find out if I did this right or not. And it looks like, yes, I did. Okay, so I'm going to sew, I'm going to fold everything down. I'm going to fold everything down. Start at my 1/2 inch here and go all the way around the collar until I get to the other side. So I snip the corners just so I don't forget. Now we folded everything down. Now we're going to fold everything up. It's a weird collar, but it does make things a little easier. Matter of fact, I may even, heaven forbid, use a pin to hold it up. I'm going to go across right there and then straight down this edge. And since I have the front flap pinned and out of the way, I don't have to worry about it. So I'm just going to sew this edge. Now this kind of juts out. We're going to have nothing but problems trying to turn it right side out. We're going to try it anyway before I go cutting things. I normally just put in a snip right here, but I'm not quite sure. I don't think we need it. Because this one is a little different than normal. Looks pretty all right. So we've got these little gaps right here. We're about to take care of that. I just wanted to see how everything looked, and I'm pretty happy with how everything lines up. So now we turn it all right side, or inside out again. All right, we have these weird gaps right where everything meets because I didn't want to go over anything the wrong way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold those down and just stitch straight across. And that'll seal everything up nice and neat. Then we should be done with the collar. We're now on to sleeves. Sleeves are actually pretty easy. I have the right side of the outer sleeve. This is the arm's eye. And then I have the sleeve itself. Luckily it's folded in half. I'm just going to start pinning at the seam and working my way around. I leave the armpit completely open. I sew that after the sleeve is on. It makes way more sense than sewing this together and trying to fit the sleeve to it. I just sew the sleeve on and then I do this last. So I'm going to pin this, pin all four of them because there's a outer and a lining. And then sew it. We'll pick back up after that. Now the sleeves are on. It's starting to look like a jacket. Check that thing out. Neat. All right. Speaking of the armpits, it's kind of where we're at. The easiest way to do this is to pin the sleeve to the armpit and then go down. Excuse me, Vash. The split's right there at the hip. It's 13 inches. It's all right. It's fine. Jeez Louise. So, I am going to pin all the sleeves together independently, right? So much fabric, I can't even find the sleeve. So I'm going to pin the sleeves together, and then from this seam here, which is the armpit seam, I'm going to sew down 13 inches. Go a little back and forth, a little reinforcing stitch there, that way when we flip it out it doesn't have to tear. And then we're going to flip it all right side out. But first, all four sleeves get sewn just like that. It's one straight line. It's just a simple, easy straight line. Sleeves are super simple if you do them this way. I'm not going to call it the right way. I made these, or I figured out how to do these when I was working on Inuyasha and Kikyo, because that's an Asian style how they put them together, and I love that, and that's how I've been doing sleeves ever since. I'm almost out of bobbin thread. A little too close. All right. Turn this right side out real quick. I have the worst time with sleeves. I fight with them constantly. They never seem to... It always works out. It's just never easy. You know? Sleeves and zippers. Sleeves and zippers. Same as sleeves and zippers. Sleeves and flies. Alright. So I've got everything put together. Except for the bottom hem. We're leaving that for last. Now we're working on the sleeves. We have to finish off the sleeves before we do the bottom hem because we have to flip everything inside a couple of times. So, it's real easy to get this sleeve all twisted and weird. And it's not the end of the world if it happens. Just if I have the ability, I'm going to try and fix it. So, I'm running my finger along the inside hem. There it is. So I know that this side and this side go together. I'm going to fold it over. And fold it over. and then pin right at this seam. Right? I'm going to super pin that one too. Goes in multiple times. See? As opposed to just in and out. So now that I have this pinned in place, and I don't have to worry about it twisting, I'm going to pull it back out. Right there, I can see exactly how this sleeve needs to be pinned on, right? So I'm just going to start at the same edge. Let me get you a little better view. There's a lot of red here. It's all kind of going to flash together. It's hard to see. But this was the pin we put on the outside. So I just flip it over, and I know that this is how this is supposed to be pinned together. So I'm just going to start here and just pin, right? Now that I got this started, I will pull this pin out. I have found that when you try to pin everything like this together, it's hard to visualize what you're actually doing. So I found if you take the whole sleeve, shove it in a bit, and then pin this way, it just seems to make more sense to me. Rather than trying to pin it like this. I mean, this works too, but for tighter sleeves, I tend to push the lining in and pull it out a bit so it looks like it's coming out of the sleeve. Let me show you what that actually looks like. There. So now I don't even have to worry about that. I'm just pinning this together. And once I do that on both sides, I'm going to do a single stitch all the way around, flip it right side out, and then do the top stitch. I never know how much sewing to show in these stupid videos. Alright, so the sleeve's been sewed. We're going to pull this right side out. And now, I know my sleeve is doing the sleeve thing. I should have made the shell like 2 inches longer and the lining 2 inches shorter. That way the shell wrapped around. That would make for a much more durable sleeve. But it's not as comfortable. And on this jacket in particular, I'm going for comfort. I want it to be a very comfortable jacket. Most sewing machines have a thing you can take off, which makes the throat much thinner. And that is for things like this. It's just much easier to do it this way than fighting. And I think I just ran out of bobbin. Almost, hopefully. Only got like 2 inches to go. There it was. I suppose that is almost exactly. But now I know the sleeve goes on fine. There's no weird bunching, and it's rolled right. Let me spool up another bobbin. So the other side, and then we'll hem the end up. Then we'll hem the bottom up and be done. Sleeves are done. I'm very happy with it. It looks fantastic. It's much lighter than the one I made for Johnny. It flows much better. It's more of a spring jacket, and that's kind of what I was going for. We have to do the hem now, and the hem's kind of brutal. It's not terrible, it's just annoying. And to do the hem, we have to turn the whole thing right side out, or inside out. Luckily, this is super easy to do. I have measured down from the armpit, down from the neck, and down from the other armpit. So where these match up is exactly where everything matches up. This canvas stretches a little more than the lining. And because of that, it means I have a little gap here that I have to cut off before I put everything together. So I need to lay everything out, smooth everything out, make sure all my points match up, because that's going to make the next step much easier. Once everything is properly lined up, there's not that much really. The fabric walks, it moves, it's what fabric does. So I just trim all of everything to be nice and even. Okay. And then everything's going to line up. We're going to turn it inside out. And starting at this front seam, I'm just going to go all the way around. So I'm going to go all the way around. And then when we get to this split here, so this one right here, I'm going to fold out. So I'm going to sew up to here. And then I'm going to stop when I get to this stitch because I can see it on both sides. I'm going to sew this side up. And I'm going to flip this open. Come over to the other side. Sew it straight up. Stop when I get here. And then once both sides are done and stitched pretty much to the same point, I'm going to fold it open and then just do a small reinforced stitch right along here. And that gives us this, right? This is actually the combination of 4 seams all together. But when we flip it right side out, there we go. When this all gets top stitched, because we will top stitch all along here, then do a reinforced seam and then go back down, it makes a nice even split. So then just do this 3 more times. But on this one in particular, or is this, no, on this one, since this is the back panel, or the one of the back panels, I'm gonna leave about this much open, not stitched. That way when I can turn it right side out through this little opening. But like I said, I'm gonna do that 2 more times for 3 altogether. And then we're gonna get back to top stitching. And then we should be pretty done. Except for there's a lot of hand sewing on this one because there are an exceptional number of snaps on this stupid jacket. Every time I do this, it's like a magic trick. Bag lining is neat. That's what this is called, by the way, I believe. I'm self-taught, but I've been doing it for a very, very long time. So I've picked up a lot of the nomenclature. So the more you can get out of, there it goes. Out of this, the easier everything comes apart. Let's try that again. The more fabric you can get on the outside, the easier this whole process becomes. So for this, I pulled out the collar and cowl first. Then I got the sleeves out. That's just a bulk of fabric out of the way. Now I left the opening large enough that I can get my hand into it, because I'm going to need to get these corners a little flatter. But sleeve, cowl. My order of operations on this process has been a little weird, a little messed up. I should have done the this front panel first. That way I could have been sewing buttons on this entire time, but didn't. So here we are. I top stitch, then I sew all the buttons on. Buttons and snaps, buttons and snaps. This whole costume is mostly buttons and snaps. But here we are. Like I said, top stitching in this hole. This is gonna get top stitched down. You'll never see it. And this front panel, it's done exactly like the belts. I mean, like 100% like the belt. It's just a very wide belt, basically. I'm gonna save you all the pain of watching me hand sew 41 buttons onto this jacket and a bunch of snaps. So come here, Vash. Let's talk about the jacket real quick for a couple seconds. I could. My stand seems to be messed up. There. These are supposed to be full-on buttons, right? But that's just crazy. I could sew them on and then make button loops, and it looks cleaner to have them sewn in place. Same with all of these. But because they aren't real buttons, I use snaps, which makes taking the thing on and off so much easier and so much nicer and so much more comfortable. But that's the stage we're at. Snaps and buttons. So I'll take care of those, and we'll be back for the reveal hopefully soon. So here he is, done. Looks fantastic. It's way softer than Kim's, and it's going to be way more comfortable. It looks great. I'm very happy with it. Full disclosure, not all the buttons are on. Some of them are safety pinned in place, and some of the snaps aren't on yet. That's just hand stitching. It takes forever, and it doesn't change how it's going to look. But check him out. I'm very happy with how he looks. It turned out fantastic. It's nice to have an easy sewing project. I know easy, I've been fighting with this thing the whole time. But it is what it is. Thanks for making it to the end. I really appreciate that. Hopefully you didn't get here by just skipping and you watched the whole video. That'd be nice. What else would be nice? A little like, maybe a comment. Comments are fantastic. I like when people comment. I tend to respond. I'm very happy with how he looks. Again, thanks for making it to the end. I do have channel memberships, so if that's a thing you may be interested in, I do have some behind the scenes stuff, member only videos, member only posts, stuff like that. It's just a couple bucks a month. So if you are in a position where you think that might be something you're interested in, then by all means, welcome to the club. Other than that, I'll see you next time.